Rain lashed against the cold marble headstone as Gabriel Costa, the city's most feared syndicate boss, fell to his knees, sobbing. For 4 years he had mourned his little girl, until a shivering, dirt-streaked, homeless teenager tugged his cashmere coat and whispered a secret that would ignite a war. "Sir, she is still alive." The sky over Greenwood Cemetery was the color of bruised iron. A relentless, freezing downpour battered the manicured lawns, turning the pathways into slick, black ribbons. 100 yards away, 4 men in tailored dark suits and heavy overcoats stood like gargoyles, their eyes scanning the perimeter. They were the elite enforcers of the Costa family, but today they were completely useless. No amount of firepower could protect their boss from the ghosts that haunted him. Gabriel Costa knelt in the mud. He did not care about the $3,000 suit or the freezing water seeping through his trousers. He was a man who controlled politicians, unions, and the entire eastern seaboard's shipping lanes. Yet here, before a small marble angel, he was utterly powerless. Sofia Bella Costa, beloved daughter, taken too soon. The gold leaf engraving mocked him. It had been exactly 4 years since the car bomb tore through his armored SUV on the Pulaski Skyway. It was a hit meant for him, orchestrated by a rival faction. But Gabriel had been delayed in a meeting. His wife, Isabella, and his 4-year-old daughter, Sophia, had been in the vehicle. The explosion had been so massive, the ensuing fire so intense, that the authorities told him there was virtually nothing left. Only fragments. Only ashes. Gabriel placed a single white rose on the grave, his broad shoulders shaking. The monster who ruled the underworld wept like a broken child. "I'm sorry," he choked out, his voice a gravelly whisper lost in the wind. "I should have been in that car. It should have been me." He closed his eyes, preparing to push himself up and return to the empty fortress he called home, when a sound broke his reverie. It wasn't the heavy, purposeful tread of his bodyguards. It was the light, hesitant shuffling of worn-out sneakers on wet gravel. Gabriel's instincts, honed by decades of violence, flared. His hand instinctively brushed the cold steel of the Sig Sauer concealed beneath his coat. He turned, his dark eyes narrowing into a lethal glare. Standing 10 feet away was a girl. She couldn't have been older than 14. She was bone-thin, trembling violently beneath a tattered, oversized army surplus jacket. Her matted blonde hair clung to her pale, hollow cheeks, and her eyes were wide, darting nervously between Gabriel and the distant bodyguards. "Get lost!" Gabriel growled, his grief morphing instantly into rage. "This is a private plot. If you want a handout, go to the church." The girl didn't run. She swallowed hard, taking a half step forward. Her lips were blue from the cold. Mr. Costa," she stammered, her voice cracking. Gabriel stood to his full 6'2" height, towering over her. The fact that a street beggar knew his name was a massive security breach. "Who sent you?" he demanded, taking a menacing step toward her. "If the Falcone family thinks sending a kid to disrespect my daughter's grave is a message, I will paint the streets with them." "No!" the girl shrieked, holding up her frail hands. "No one sent me. I swear, I read about you in the papers. I saw the pictures, the anniversary." She pointed a trembling, dirt-caked finger toward the marble angel. "I know about the bombing. Leave now, before I let my men drag you out of here," Gabriel ordered, turning his back on her. But the girl lunged forward. With desperate strength, she grabbed the sleeve of his heavy cashmere coat. Gabriel spun, ready to throw her to the ground, but the words that tumbled from her mouth froze the blood in his veins. "Sir, she is still alive." The rain seemed to stop. The world tilted on its axis. Gabriel stared down at the scrawny teenager, his chest heaving. Slowly, his large, scarred hand shot out, wrapping around the collar of her jacket. He lifted her onto her tiptoes, pulling her face inches from his. "What did you just say to me?" he whispered, his voice vibrating with a terrifying, quiet intensity. "What kind of sick, twisted game are you playing? It's not a game," she cried, tears mingling with the rain on her cheeks. "My name is Chloe. 4 years ago, I was sleeping in the abandoned train yard under the Pulaski overpass. I saw it. I saw the black car. The whole city saw it on the news." Gabriel spat, tightening his grip. "You're lying to get money." "She was wearing a yellow raincoat," Chloe screamed, struggling against his grip. "A yellow raincoat with little red ladybugs on the buttons. The news never said that. The police never released that." Gabriel dropped her. Chloe fell to the wet grass, gasping for air. Gabriel stumbled backward, clutching his chest. The raincoat. Isabella had bought it for Sophia the day before. It was a custom, hand-stitched coat from a boutique in Milan. The authorities hadn't known about it, because it had completely burned in the wreckage, or so they assumed. There was absolutely no way this homeless child could know about the red ladybug buttons unless she had seen Sophia that night. "Tell me," Gabriel commanded, his voice trembling, stripped of all its Mafia bravado. "Tell me exactly what you saw, Chloe." Chloe pulled her knees to her chest, shivering. Before the car exploded, it stopped. Another car, a dark grey van, pulled up behind it. A man got out. He went to the back door of the black SUV. I thought he was helping, but he dragged the driver out and shot him. Then he opened the back door. Gabriel's mind raced. His driver, Quinn, had been found with a bullet in his skull, but the police assumed it was from a drive-by shooter before the bomb went off. "The man reached in," Chloe continued, her voice haunted by the memory. "He pulled out a little girl in that yellow coat. She was crying. He clamped his hand over her mouth, shoved her into the grey van, and drove off. 2 minutes later, the black car blew up. Why? Gabriel dropped to his knees in the mud, staring at the girl. "Why didn't you go to the cops? Why wait 4 years? I was 10 years old," Chloe cried. "I was a runaway. The cops would have thrown me in juvenile detention, and the man who took her. I saw his face. I saw him talking to a police officer 2 days later down by the docks. He handed the cop an envelope. I knew if I told the police, that man would find me and kill me." Gabriel's hands balled into fists. The grief that had paralyzed him for 4 years was instantly vaporized, replaced by a blinding, white-hot inferno of vengeance and desperate hope. His daughter hadn't burned. She had been stolen. He stood up, turning toward his men. He raised his hand, signaling them. Instantly, the 4 suited men sprinted across the lawn. "Silvio!" Gabriel barked at his lead enforcer. "Get the armored Lincoln, heat the seats, and get a blanket." He looked down at Chloe, extending a massive, calloused hand to her. "You are coming with me. If you are telling the truth, you will never spend another night on the streets for the rest of your life. But if you are lying, God won't be able to save you from what I'll do." Chloe looked at his hand, then up at his desperate eyes. She reached out and took it. Gabriel Costa's palatial estate in the Palisades was a fortress. Wrought iron gates, armed patrols, and state-of-the-art security systems isolated it from the world. Inside, the mansion was a museum of imported Italian marble, priceless art, and echoing silence. Since Isabella and Sophia's supposed deaths, Gabriel had stripped the house of all warmth. Within an hour of leaving the cemetery, the mansion's sprawling mahogany dining room had been converted into a war room. Chloe sat at the head of the long table, wrapped in a thick, heated blanket, devouring a plate of roasted chicken and potatoes prepared by Gabriel's private chef. It was the first hot meal she'd had in a week. Surrounding her were Gabriel's most trusted capos. The air was thick with tension, cigarette smoke, and the smell of expensive espresso. Gabriel stood by the window, staring out into the rain, his phone pressed to his ear. He was speaking to Thomas Rinaldi, his second-in-command, who was currently overseas handling the family's casino operations in Macau. "I don't care about the Macau deal, Thomas," Gabriel barked into the phone. "Put the Chinese triads on hold. Freeze everything. I need you back in the city tonight. Charter the private jet. We have a ghost to hunt." He hung up the phone and turned his attention back to Chloe. Silvio, a giant of a man with a jagged scar running down his cheek, poured the girl a glass of warm milk. "You're doing great, kid," Silvio grunted softly. "Now, think hard. The man who took the girl. You said you saw him clearly under the streetlights before the explosion." Chloe swallowed her food and nodded. "He was tall, dressed in a dark trench coat. He had dark hair, slicked back, but it was greying at the temples. But the thing I remember most, when he grabbed the little girl, the streetlight hit his hand. He was missing the tip of his pinky finger, and he wore a massive gold ring on his index finger. It had a weird shape on it, like a bird." A deafening silence crashed over the room. Gabriel stopped breathing. Silvio exchanged a dark, horrified look with Dante, the family's chief interrogator. "A bird?" Gabriel asked, his voice eerily calm as he walked slowly toward the table. "Was it a hawk, Chloe? A hawk with its wings spread, clutching a sword?" Chloe's eyes widened in recognition. "Yes, exactly that. How did you know?" Gabriel didn't answer. He looked down at his own right hand. On his index finger rested a heavy gold signet ring. A hawk with its wings spread, clutching a sword. The crest of the Costa family. Only 5 of those rings existed in the world. They were given only to the ruling council of the syndicate. The traitor wasn't a rival family. The traitor was one of his own. "Someone at this table," Gabriel said quietly, not looking at his men, "or someone very close to it, sold my daughter." The atmosphere in the room turned instantly lethal. Men shifted uncomfortably, hands inching toward holstered weapons. Loyalty in the Mafia was paramount, but paranoia was a close second. "Boss," Silvio said carefully, raising his hands to show he meant no threat. "We need to look at the ledgers. If someone on the inside orchestrated a hit and an abduction, they needed resources. Burner cars, safe houses, payouts to corrupt cops. I want the financial records of every capo, every lieutenant, and every soldier in this family for the last 5 years, Gabriel ordered, his eyes burning with a manic intensity. "Dante, you tear the city's underground apart. I want to know about every child trafficking ring, every illegal adoption agency, every dark web broker operating on the East Coast." "Boss, that's stirring up a hornet's nest," Dante warned. "The feds will notice. The Colombians will notice." "Let them notice," Gabriel roared, slamming his fist onto the mahogany table with such force that the china rattled. "My daughter is out there. Someone ripped her from her mother's dead body and sold her into the shadows. I will burn this city to the bedrock to find her." For the next 48 hours, the criminal underworld of the city experienced a seismic shift. Gabriel's men hit the streets like a tidal wave of violence. Illegal gambling dens were raided by Costa enforcers demanding information. Crooked dock workers were dangled over shipping containers. Corrupt police detectives suddenly found themselves dragged into soundproof basements and interrogated at gunpoint. It was during one of these brutal interrogations that Dante finally found a thread. He burst into Gabriel's private study on the 3rd night. Gabriel hadn't slept. He was sitting at his desk, staring at a framed photograph of Isabella and Sophia. "We got something," Dante said, tossing a bloody, leather-bound ledger onto Gabriel's desk. "We raided a basement poker game run by the Irish mob. One of their loan sharks was bragging about a phantom broker they use for special cargo. Kids. He dropped a name. Sent Agnes home for the wayward." Gabriel looked up, his eyes bloodshot. "That's an abandoned orphanage in the Bronx. The city shut it down a decade ago." "Exactly," Dante nodded. "But according to the street, it's not abandoned. The basement is being used as a holding facility for high-value human trafficking. Rich clients, foreign buyers. They process the kids there before shipping them out of the country." Gabriel stood up, grabbing his customized assault rifle from the gun cabinet. "Gear up. Call every man we have. We're hitting St. Agnes." An hour later, a convoy of 6 black, armored SUVs rolled into the desolate, graffiti-covered neighborhood of the Bronx. The St. Agnes orphanage loomed in the darkness, a decaying Gothic structure with boarded-up windows. Gabriel didn't wait for a tactical breach. He kicked the rotting front doors off their hinges. Gunfire erupted immediately. The traffickers guarding the lobby were heavily armed mercenaries, but they were entirely unprepared for the sheer, ruthless aggression of the Costa Syndicate. Gabriel moved through the crossfire like a demon, his rifle dropping 2 men before they could even draw their weapons. They cleared the ground floor in 3 minutes. They breached the basement, blowing the steel-reinforced doors with C4 explosives. What Gabriel found inside made his stomach churn. It was a makeshift prison, rows of small cots, barred cells, and terrified children huddled in corners. His men immediately began securing the room, bringing blankets, and ushering the traumatized kids toward the stairs. Gabriel ran from cell to cell, his flashlight cutting through the gloom. "Sophia! Sophia!" he screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. He looked at every face, every frightened pair of eyes, but his daughter was not there. He punched a concrete wall, the skin of his knuckles splitting open. "She's not here, Dante. Where is she?" "Boss, look at this!" Silvio called out from a small, barricaded office at the back of the basement. Gabriel rushed in. Silvio had a terrified, bleeding man pinned to a desk. It was the facility's administrator. On the desk were stacks of files, adoption records, shipping manifests, bank transfers. Silvio held up a specific file folder. It was old. The date stamped on the front was August 16th, 2022, 2 days after the bombing. Gabriel snatched the file. He flipped it open. Pinned to the top of the paperwork was a Polaroid photograph. Gabriel's breath hitched. His knees buckled, and he had to grab the edge of the desk to keep from collapsing. It was a picture of a little girl, fast asleep on a cot, wearing a soot-stained yellow raincoat with red ladybug buttons. Sophia. "Where did she go?" Gabriel whispered, pressing the barrel of his rifle directly against the administrator's forehead. "Tell me where she went, or I swear to God I will empty this magazine into your skull." "I don't know," the man sobbed, trembling violently. "I swear, we just hold them. The broker handles the transfers." "Who was the broker?" Gabriel roared. The man swallowed hard, staring cross-eyed at the gun barrel. "He used a fake name, but the bank transfer came from an offshore account in Macau. The guy who brought the girl in. He was a VIP, a made man." We weren't allowed to ask questions. Gabriel froze. Macau. His mind flashed back to the phone call he made 3 days ago, to Thomas Rinaldi, his second-in-command, the man who had been expanding their casino operations in Macau for the last 4 years. The man who was missing the tip of his pinky finger from an old knife fight. Gabriel looked at the signature at the bottom of the trafficking manifest. It was scrawled hastily, but the handwriting was unmistakably familiar. The traitor wasn't just a soldier. It was the man Gabriel called his brother. The Gulfstream G650 tore through the stratosphere at 600 miles per hour, leaving the frozen, rain-soaked skyline of New York City far behind. Inside the ultra-luxury cabin, the silence was absolute, heavy, and suffocating. There was no clinking of crystal whiskey glasses, no low murmur of syndicate business, no laughter. Gabriel Costa sat in the oversized leather captain's chair, his dark eyes locked onto the solid gold signet ring on his index finger, the hawk gripping the sword. Across the aisle, Silvio and Dante sat in grim silence, methodically checking and rechecking the action on their customized Sig Sauer P, 226 sidearms, and Heckler and Koch MP5 submachine guns. Gabriel's mind was a chaotic storm of memories, violently clashing against the present reality. Thomas Rinaldi wasn't just a capo. He was the man who had taken a bullet in the shoulder for Gabriel outside a social club in Little Italy 12 years ago. He was the godfather to Sophia. He had stood beside Gabriel at Isabella's empty casket, weeping, holding Gabriel upright when his legs had given out. It was all a performance, a masterclass in sociopathic deception. "Boss!" Dante's rough voice broke the hum of the jet engines. "We have the coordinates. Thomas operates out of a heavily fortified cliffside estate in Cologne, the southern tip of Macau. It's isolated. Private security. Ex-military contractors. The local police don't even look in its direction." "How many men?" Gabriel asked, his voice entirely devoid of emotion. It was the terrifying dead calm of a man who had already accepted that he was going to walk through hell. 30? Maybe 40, Silvio answered, snapping a fresh magazine into his tactical vest. "Heavy artillery. The perimeter has motion sensors, infrared cameras, and a 12-foot reinforced steel wall. It's a fortress, Gabriel. We are walking in with 8 men. This is a suicide run." "Then we die," Gabriel said flatly, finally looking up. "But we do not die until I have my daughter. And I have Thomas's heart beating in the palm of my hand. Do you understand me?" Both men nodded slowly. Loyalty to the Costa family wasn't just a pledge, it was a blood oath. And Gabriel's pain was their pain. 14 hours later, the private jet touched down on the tarmac of Macau International Airport. The city was a glittering, neon-drenched jewel of vice, a labyrinth of billion-dollar casinos, the Venetian, the Grand Lisboa, and shadowy underworld empires. But Gabriel had no interest in the neon. He was here for the shadows. Because they were vastly outnumbered, Gabriel couldn't rely on brute force alone to breach the Cologne estate. He needed leverage. As soon as they bypassed customs, facilitated by well-placed bribes to local aviation officials, Gabriel's convoy of black Mercedes G-Wagons headed straight for the docks, into the territory of Winston Way. Winston Way was a dragonhead of the 14K Triad, the undisputed ruler of Macau's underground shipping and smuggling operations. If Thomas was moving illicit funds and trafficked children through Macau, Way knew about it. They met in a subterranean VIP room beneath a thriving seafood market. The air smelled of salt, blood, and expensive cigar smoke. Way, a slender, sharply dressed man in his 50s, sat surrounded by heavily armed soldiers holding compact automatic weapons. Gabriel walked into the room entirely unarmed, holding only a silver briefcase. Silvio and Dante stood at the door. "Gabriel Costa," Way said in perfectly accented English, a slight, calculating smile on his face. "To what do I owe the honor of the American Caesar in my city? I was under the impression Thomas Rinaldi handled your Asian portfolio." "Thomas Rinaldi is a dead man walking," Gabriel stated, placing the briefcase on the table and snapping the locks open. Inside were neat, banded stacks of bearer bonds, $10 million in untraceable currency. I am not here to do business, Mr. Wei. I am here to burn Thomas to the ground. This money is for you to tell your local police contacts to ignore any explosions they hear in Cologne tonight, and to give me the structural blueprints of his estate. Wei looked at the money, then up at Gabriel's terrifyingly hollow eyes. The triad boss leaned back. Thomas has been arrogant lately. He bypasses my docks, uses his own smugglers. He brings heat. I do not like heat. Keep your money, Mr. Costa. Consider the blueprints a professional courtesy between men who value loyalty. Wei slid a digitized tablet across the table. There is a subterranean drainage tunnel leading from the coastal cliffs directly into the basement of his compound. The tide is low at 2 a.m. It will bypass the infrared perimeter. Gabriel took the tablet. If I survive tonight, the Costa shipping lanes in New York are open to you, tax-free, for a decade. At 1:45 a.m., the rain that had plagued New York seemed to have followed Gabriel across the globe. A violent typhoon was brewing off the coast of the South China Sea, lashing the rocky cliffs of Cologne with torrential downpours and howling winds. It was the perfect cover. Clad in pitch-black tactical gear, Gabriel, Silvio, Dante, and 5 of the deadliest enforcers the American Mafia had ever produced scaled the jagged rocks at the base of the cliff. The roaring ocean below threatened to swallow them whole, but Gabriel climbed with the relentless, mechanical focus of a predator. They found the rusted iron grate covering the drainage tunnel exactly where Wei said it would be. Silvio planted a strip of silent, thermite-based cutting tape. Sparks hissed violently against the rain, melting through the thick iron in seconds. Gabriel kicked the grate inward. They slipped into the darkness, water sloshing around their boots. The tunnel led directly to the estate's sprawling underground parking garage and utility basement. As they emerged from the grate, they were immediately met by 2 heavily armed contractors in tactical gear, patrolling the luxury cars. Before the guards could even raise their radios, Dante and Silvio moved with phantom-like speed. 2 suppressed pft-pft sounds echoed off the concrete, and the guards dropped instantly, neutralized before they could draw a breath. "Dante, you take the garage and disable the backup generators," Gabriel ordered in a hushed, lethal whisper. "Silvio, you're with me. We breach the ground floor. Leave no one standing." They moved up the concrete stairwell, stacking up against the heavy steel door that led into the mansion's main foyer. Gabriel held up 3 fingers. 2. 1. Silvio kicked the door with the force of a battering ram. The ensuing violence was swift, brutal, and utterly overwhelming. Thomas's mercenaries were expecting a frontal assault, perhaps a bomb at the gate, not an elite kill squad manifesting from the basement. Gabriel stepped into the grand, marble-floored living room, his MP5 raised. Gunfire erupted, shattering priceless Ming vases and tearing through antique Italian furniture. Gabriel moved flawlessly through the crossfire, his weapon spitting controlled bursts of suppressed fire. He wasn't a general barking orders from the rear. He was the Reaper himself, leading the harvest. 3 mercenaries dropped in the hallway. 2 more fell on the sweeping staircase, their bodies tumbling down the carpeted steps. The Costa enforcers moved with terrifying synchronization, clearing rooms with military precision. Gabriel didn't care about the guards. His eyes scanned every door, every corridor, searching for the one face that mattered. Suddenly, the compound's alarms finally shrieked to life, bathing the hallways in flashing red strobe lights. "He knows we're here," Silvio yelled over the gunfire. "Second floor, boss. The master suite." Gabriel dropped his empty submachine gun and drew his customized Kimber 1911 pistol. He sprinted up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, ignoring a grazing bullet that tore through the fabric of his tactical shoulder pad. He kicked open the heavy oak doors of the master suite. It was empty. A massive four-poster bed, a roaring fireplace, but no Thomas. Gabriel's eyes darted around the room. He noticed a massive bookshelf, slightly ajar, scraping against the thick Persian rug. A panic room. Gabriel walked over to the heavy steel door concealed behind the shelf. He didn't try to pry it. He didn't yell. He simply raised his pistol and fired 3 rounds into the electronic keypad, shattering the locking mechanism. He shoved his weight against the heavy steel, forcing it open, and stepped into the stark, fluorescent-lit safe room. "Drop it, Gabe, or she dies." Gabriel froze. In the center of the safe room stood Thomas Rinaldi, calm and composed, a silver gun pressed to the head of a trembling little girl. The world narrowed to her face. Older, thinner, but unmistakable. Sophia. The name left Gabriel like a broken prayer. She didn't recognize him. Fear filled her wide eyes. "Put the gun down," Gabriel said quietly, his voice laced with deadly promise, "or I make your death last a lifetime." Thomas laughed, unraveling. Confessions spilled, jealousy, betrayal, twisted love. He claimed he saved Sophia, hid her away, gave her a life. Gabriel lowered his weapon. "Look at her," he said softly. "She's afraid of you." For a split second, Thomas glanced down. That was enough. The shot rang out. Thomas dropped instantly. Sophia screamed, collapsing to the floor. Gabriel threw his gun aside and rushed forward, ripping off his mask. "It's me," he whispered, sliding a worn photograph toward her. She stared at it, then at him. "Daddy!" she breathed. He broke. Pulling her into his arms, Gabriel held her as if the world might steal her again. "I've got you," he choked. "Never again." 2 weeks later, sunlight filled the Costa estate. Laughter replaced silence. Gabriel watched Sophia run freely, finally safe. The empire burned, but in its ashes, he found something greater. His daughter. Out of the ashes of betrayal, a father's relentless love tore down an entire underworld to bring his daughter home. Gabriel's journey from grief-stricken mob boss to a redeemed father proves that even in the darkest shadows, love can ignite the brightest light. If this epic tale of vengeance and redemption kept you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe for more incredible, heart-stopping, real-life dramas.